Protests and road blockades against the administration of Dina Boluarte continue in Peru after a day of nationwide peaceful demonstrations. China's Hong Kong will reopen its border with the mainland as part of the easing of COVID-19 restrictions. And the longest-serving Palestinian prisoner, Karim Younis, has been released after serving 40 years in an Israeli prison. From the headquarters of TeleSUR English in Havana, Cuba, this is From the South. I'm your anchor, Gladys Quesada. On Thursday, protests and road blockades against the administration of Dina Boluarte continue in Peru after a day of nationwide peaceful demonstrations, but with clashes between protesters and the police in Lima. In the country's capital, protesters denounced that the police fired tear gas to disperse those who were peacefully demonstrating and protesting in the Manco Capac Square. They also stated that the police agents repressed them when they only were expressing their demands and defending their rights. In regions such as Arequipa, Puno, Cusco, Cajamarca, and Apurimac, sectors of the population joined the mobilizations demanding the closing of the Congress, a Constituent Assembly, and the release of former President Pedro Castillo. They also held a minute of silence for the people who died as a result of the repression against the protests that have taken place since December the 7th. And while there are massive mobilizations all over Peru in rejection of the National Congress, on Wednesday, Popular Renovation Party Congressperson Alejandro Muñante introduced a bill that enables legislators to be re-elected immediately in the following period. Meanwhile, the parliamentarian representing the Avanza País party, Rosely Amuruz, submitted a proposal to shorten the terms of the authorities of electoral bodies. On Thursday, the National Jury of Elect rejected the proposal, stating it interferes in the autonomous decisions of the highest instance of the judiciary as well as of the National Board of Justice. On Wednesday, Bolivia's Interior Minister Eduardo del Castillo announced that 76 people are being prosecuted for taking part in violent actions amid protests following the detention of Santa Cruz Governor Luis Fernando Camacho. Del Castillo stated that the defendants were arrested while destroying or deteriorating state property, as well as inciting others to commit crimes. He also said that while 24 citizens have been sentenced, 22 others are awaiting precautionary hearings, 14 are in preventive detention, and 16 have alternative measures. These citizens were involved in the attacks on the building of the Santa Cruz Departmental Prosecutor's Office, the facilities of the Police Departmental Command, and the residence of the Public Works Minister Edgar Montaño. On Thursday, in the Dominican Republic, national forces seized 242 packages of what is suspected to be cocaine in the city of Boca Chica, in the province of Santo Domingo. The information was given by the website of the Drug Bureau and detailed the operation lasted several hours as the army units followed smugglers seeking to introduce the substance into national territory. 9 bales were seized and 7 people were arrested, 6 Dominicans and 1 Venezuelan, who will be prosecuted for violation of the law on drugs and controlled substances. They also seized the boat where they were operating, satellite phones, and other vehicles and articles. The agency said the investigation will continue to locate other members of an alleged international drug trafficking network. In the United States, 8 people, including 5 children, were found dead from a gunshot wounds in a southern Utah home on Wednesday. According to a statement made by city officials in Anaheim, a small town of about 8,000 people located more than 300 kilometers south of Salt Lake City, the victims were found where police did a welfare check at the residence. Enoch City Manager Rob Dodson said the deceased, all members of one family, were well known in the southern Utah town. also said that welfare checks based on calls to the police department, like the one that led them to the residence, are routine when individuals are not seen for extended periods of time. And now we move on to other topics. Angola's President, João Lourenço, published a decree on Thursday explaining that there were worrying levels of pollution resulting from the use of plastic in general. The text that came out in the journal de Angola specifies that a working group will be set up to carry out a national diagnosis to measure the state of the pollution in the country. The head of the National Agency for Solid Waste declared that in the country, 12.4 million plastic bags are distributed free of charge in commerce every day. Angola has 1,600 kilometers of coastline, and plastic pollution is a real threat to aquatic ecosystems. According to the UN, more than 800 marine and coastal species are affected by plastic pollution through ingestion and entanglement, while some 11 million tons of plastic waste are dumped into the ocean every year. The UN warns that this figure could triple by 2040. In the United States, California's governor, Gavin Newsom, declared on Wednesday a state of emergency in the face of a massive winter storm. The United States National Weather Service warned that the storm will cause rains, floods, landslides, and rainfall. It also stated that the heaviest rainfall will occur between the early hours of Wednesday and Thursday morning local time. Given the situation, Governor Newsom mobilized members of the National Guard to help in the relief efforts and to protect the lives of civilians. He also activated the local operations center at its highest level. This situation comes shortly after Winter Storm Elliott left more than 60 people dead and 1.7 million homes without power in the state of New York. Let's take a short break, but first, remember you can follow us on our TikTok account at TeleSUR English, in which you will be able to see news in different formats, news updates, and more. Other stories coming up, stay with us. Welcome back to From the South. In China, the city of Hong Kong will reopen its border with the mainland on Sunday, allowing tens of thousands of people to cross from each side every day without quarantine. Thursday's announcement comes as China is easing some of the world's toughest antivirus control. The city's land and sea border checkpoints with the mainland have been largely closed for almost 3 years under China's zero-COVID strategy. The Chinese government said in a statement that during the first phase of the reopening, 4 border checkpoints that were closed will resume operations, bringing the number of open checkpoints up to 7. They will also gradually increase in the number of flights between Hong Kong and the mainland. The reopening is expected to provide a much-needed boost to Hong Kong's economy, especially in the tourism sector. In the Philippines, the National Police Chief, Rodolfo Azurin Jr., said on Thursday he has offered his resignation to encourage nearly 1,000 other top police officials to do the same after some enforcers were arrested due to illegal drugs. The statement comes after Interior Secretary Benjamin Abel. The action follows the suspension of frontline drug enforcement agents for drug trafficking. Azorin told a televised news conference that those who submit their resignations will stay in their jobs unless President Marcos Jr. decides to accept them. A 5-member committee will be formed to assess possible links of police generals and colonels to the illegal drugs trade. On Thursday, Pope Francis honored his predecessor Benedict XVI, presiding over a mass before thousands of mourners in St. Peter's Square. Heads of state, prime minister, royal representatives, clergy from around the world, and thousands of people were present at the ceremony, the first funeral for a Pope Emeritus in modern times. The former Joseph Ratzinger, who died on December 31st at the age of 95, is considered one of the 20th century's greatest theologians and spent his lifetime upholding church doctrine. After the Mass, Benedict's cypress-coffin casket before being entombed in the crypt underneath St. Peter's Basilica. According to provisional data released on Thursday by the Italian National Statistics Institute, consumer prices in Italy rose by an average of 8.1% in 2022, driven by the increase in energy bills. This is the highest rise in consumer prices since 1985. The inflation index in Italy, calculated according to European Union standards, was 12.3% in December for an average of 8.7% over the year 2022. During this year, gas prices rose by 64.8% for Italian families, with an increase of close to $2,000 per household. Inflation was triggered above all by the increase in energy, which increased by 50.9% in 2022. The far-right government of Giorgia Meloni promised to provide in 2023 more than $22 billion to help families and industries with their electric bills. And gas stations in Spain are noticeably quieter in the first week of 2023, after the government halted fuel subsidies. Spain began its fuel subsidy last April as a way to support its people amid rising energy prices brought about by the crisis in Ukraine and the slowing global economy. Previously, the government was offering drivers a 0.2 cents per liter subsidy, which could save motorists up to 14 euros when filling up their fuel tanks to the brim. But by the end of 2022, gas prices in the country returned to the levels similar to those before the Ukrainian conflict erupted, although far lower than the price peak reached last summer. However, the considerable fuel expenses are still a burden to many people's tightening finances, with overall fuel consumption in the nation continuing to fall.
Gas stations under various brands have launched their own promotions. For example, we at Repsol offer a 0.1 cents per liter discount for registered members who pay through our app. Business in the last few days of 2022 was great. People rush to refuel their cars taking advantage of the 0.2 cents per liter subsidy. Obviously, the number of cars coming for gas now is significantly lower.
Gas prices are getting higher now, so are the prices of electricity and food. The cost of living is higher, but our salaries haven't caught up. I have to spend about 30% to 40% more on energy cost per month. That's about 70 euros.
The United Kingdom's National Union of Rail, Maritime and Transport Workers continue their strike actions after the government blocked union members from negotiating with employers. Around 40,000 workers from 14 British train operators waged a strike on Wednesday, demanding better pay and conditions, bringing mass rail services across the country to a halt. However, a statement released by the union said that some companies have reached agreements with workers, including wage increases, to ensure the operation of some trains. As demands over pay, job security and working conditions remain unresolved, British commuters brace for more railway disruption in the coming weeks.
Obviously, inflation has gone through the roof. People are struggling to keep their heads above water. They deserve a pay rise. They've worked all through the pandemic for the 3 years to keep the railway running. So the fight will continue. Obviously, talking all the train operating companies and our Network Rail to negotiate with us. Our General Secretary will be in talks next week.
Welcome back to From the South. The Basque Parliament in northern Spain will vote on a constitutional reform proposal to urge the General Court to initiate a referendum on the continuation of the monarchy in the country or the establishment of a republic. The non-binding proposal of law was registered this Thursday by the leftist group Elkarrekin Podemos EU. The spokesperson of the coalition, Miren Gorataxegui, explained that full democracy cannot exist, while the head of state is the result of blood inheritance. The Basque country is an autonomous community in Spain that has a strong pro-independence presence. An initiative similar to the current proposal was rejected in 2020. Australia announced on Thursday it will boost its defense capabilities by spending $700 million on new advanced missile and rocket systems. The purchase will include United States-made high-mobility artillery rocket system known as HIMARS. Australian Defence Industry Minister Pat Conroy said the HIMARS bought by the government included launchers, missiles and training rockets and will be in use by 2026. He also said that the system had a current range of 300 kilometers, which was expected to increase with technological advances. In the same line, the government also signed a contract with Norway-based Kongsberg Aerospace Company to buy naval strike missiles for Navy destroyers and frigates, which could replace aging Harpoon anti-ship missiles as from next year. And the Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan assured on Thursday that he is studying the possibility of holding early presidential and parliamentary elections originally scheduled for June 18th. The Turkish authorities evaluate holding the polls earlier than planned due to the vacation season and to the start of the university exams in June, which could reduce turnout in the elections. Local political scientists rate April 30th, May 7th, or May 14th as possible dates for the polls. The ruling Justice and Development Party and its ally, the Nationalist Movement Party, had earlier announced that the incumbent Turkish president will be their sole candidate. In turn, the opposition has not yet named its candidate for the presidential elections. And the longest-serving Palestinian prisoner, Karim Younis, has been released on Thursday after serving 40 years in an Israeli prison. Younis was arrested in 1983 and charged in Israeli courts with the killing of Israeli soldier Abraham Bornberg in the occupied Syrian Golan Heights 3 years prior. According to the Palestinian Prisoners Association, his decades in prison made him the longest-serving Palestinian detainee. The organization also said Younis was among a group of prisoners up for release a decade ago as part of a deal mediated by the then United States Secretary of State John Kerry, but the negotiations ultimately collapsed. On Thursday, the Israeli occupation army killed a 16-year-old Palestinian during a military operation in the city of Nablus, located in the occupied northern West Bank. The Palestinian Health Ministry said in a statement that Amer Abu Zaitoun was hit in the head by a bullet fired by the soldiers during the assault. According to the report, they stormed the town and began to raid and search the homes of the citizens. The Israeli forces killed 224 Palestinians in the occupied territories in 2022, 52 of them in the Gaza Strip and the rest in the West Bank. Israeli practices in Palestinian territory constitute a clear violation of the rights of the Palestinian people, as well as related international laws and resolutions. On Wednesday, Syrian President Bashar al-Assad received the Foreign Minister of the United Arab Emirates in Damascus as part of the thawing of the relations between the two nations. Sources confirm they discussed ways to improve bilateral relations between their nations, as well as a number of regional and international issues of common interest. The foreign minister, Sheikh Abdullah bin Zayed, stressed that his government's support for a political solution to the more than a decade-old Syrian conflict in his second visit to Damascus since November 2021. His nation was the first Gulf country to reopen its embassy in Syria at the end of 2018 and also sent several batches of humanitarian aid to help the Syrian people overcome the aftermath of the blockade and the COVID-19 pandemic. And we have come to the end of this news brief. But remember, you can find this and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. And also, if you feel so inclined, please join us on